Welcome to everyone who's waited just a bit. We had a few technical difficulties, but we passed them now, and we're back again with another discussion with an extremely interesting set of gentlemen here, where we're going to be discussing all things related to Ethereum's modular thesis, the problems that come with it, the benefits of basically going down this route, what is happening in the alt L1 land. We have John here to help us talk us through that, and also how can we hope to kind of solve these things, and why the answer to that solution is chain abstraction. But jokes aside, we're we're here to have an extremely interesting and open discussion. I'm your host for today. I'm Mayur. I'm the founder and CEO at Arcana, where we're building a chain abstraction protocol, which basically aims to help users be able to unify their assets across different chains and spend them where they want to near instantly in a capital efficient manner. All right, so three extremely well qualified gentlemen to help us talk us through all of these things. So why don't we start one by one around this table here with quick introductions of yourselves, gentlemen, and the projects you represent. I know neither you nor your projects really need that sort of introduction, but it will just help the audience kind of be able to place you guys as we go through this conversation. So why don't we start with John? John, why don't you kick us off here?
All right. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm just here at the Bitcoin MENA conference. I was just saying before we started, I just watched Trump shill Bitcoin. He did an incredible job, actually. But no, I guess probably a lot of people might know me with what I'm doing with the Telos project. So basically, we're just running a little bit of an experiment with an L1 ecosystem, trying to do some ZK, trying to do a bit of work with the EVM, also launching our own exchange. So basically, we're kind of like trying to offer up as many products and services to our community as possible. One of the things with that project that has me thinking a lot about account abstraction and some of the things we'll talk about is, we operate like at different levels of the stack and even across different networks. And so the extent to which essentially at the end of the day, the user can just open their wallet, click a button, and have funds move around freely rather than having to kind of like fumble around trying to understand which network they're on and so on. I think that's a really important problem space. And yeah, I think about that a lot, actually.
Great, fantastic. Raza, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Raza. I'm the head of growth here at Scroll. Been in the space for about 4 years crypto, and before that in TradFi, mainly banking and insurance, merger and acquisitions. At Scroll, we are a layer 2 ZK rollup. So we built the native ZK VM. Very, very proud of where we focus on security and dev experience. Here to scale Ethereum. Excited to talk today about chain abstraction and the fragmented liquidity problem.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Ishan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayur, for having me here. So I'm Ishan and part of the ecosystem strategy team at Fuel. I joined Fuel like 6 months back, and before that, I was 3.5 years at Polygon, and so like have been part of the Ethereum scaling story for a while now. But again, like every story is different. So even at Fuel right now, just a little bit about Fuel, right? So again, pretty much like Scroll, we are also an Ethereum scaling solution, and again, we sort of differ on how our approach lies in terms of execution. And happy to chat more about Fuel and how we are trying to scale Ethereum and help with playing our part in the entire Ethereum story. So yeah, thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. I'm obviously biased to making conversations stick to chain abstraction, but feel free to plug in anything about how Fuel is different, how Scroll is positioning itself in this ever-growing L2 space. John, of course, you guys are also scaling and securing, but not necessarily Ethereum directly as an L2. But yeah, feel free to do that. So I'd just love to kick things off again with the theme being chain abstraction, with the theme being like the modular thesis of Ethereum, and what that has led to in terms of the benefits and the adverse effects. So I'd love for the the L2 gents here to help kick things off by firstly maybe Raza, maybe you or Ishan would like to set the stage for what the modular thesis is, why this has come about, why is it like a good path for Ethereum to take at this point.
Yeah, I can kickstart it. I think that considering Fuel's origins, actually, I think Fuel's obviously has its origin story in modularity. But yeah, I can give my take. Obviously, at this stage, I think is a good panel because we're more of a monolithic setup where we are all three layers of a blockchain we service on top of, let's say, Ethereum. I think the modular thesis is very interesting. Is that each of these components have their inherent limitations when it comes to scaling, and I think the rise of modularity came from the fact that, hey, what if we would have a different approach where you would have interoperability, to throw another buzzword in there, between different components, and you would have more of a, or maybe composability is a better word, where you would have different components interacting with each other, and then you would leverage, let's say, a different layer for its scaling switch. So Alt DA, had its popularity where it started, Celestia and Avail, EigenDA. And then on the execution layer, well, I was very interested about Fuel. I think a couple of years ago, where Fuel was basically leading, and still is, on the execution layer. So I think the modular thesis in itself, and I hope Andy won't kill me when he sees this, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but the modular thesis itself is very, very interesting, where you would basically say, hey, let's decouple these several layers, and see how we can scale them where scaling is necessary.
Got it. And yeah, Ishan, what would you like to add?
I think Raza hit the nail on its head, right? I think with the modular thesis, I think just the entire idea is like Ethereum has always been like monolithic in the past, right? And then there have been scaling solutions, and they basically have been scaling Ethereum in its own way. And now with the modular thesis, right, the entire idea is like dividing the entire chain into, or like the entire stack into different pieces, and then trying to increase efficiency and trying to increase specialization in those different architectural pieces, right? Whether it's the execution layer, data availability, even consensus, right? I think uh, at DEF CON, like Drake had his own take on like what the consensus layer changes could look like. So all of this to say, like Ethereum is becoming more modular in the sense like there are now different parts to it. Whereas in the past, like it was just one chain doing everything. Now it's like different specialized parts building different specialized things for a chain that will largely serve as a world computer, or even let's say like the world settlement layer, which Ethereum is very well primed to do, right? So, and with Fuel, right? I think Raza, like you mentioned, I think Fuel has the story of Fuel goes way back, right? I think we were the first optimistic roll-up back in 2021 with the Fuel V1, and that V1 is still, as per L2 beat, like one of only two stage two roll-ups right now, right? But now with Fuel, like we have like our own Fuel VM, which plays its part in the execution layer, and we launched our mainnet like 1.5 months back, or 2 months back almost. So yeah, I think our play right now has pretty much been on the execution layer of the entire modular thesis, but things could change right in the future. And I'm assuming like a lot of things will change with the modular thesis going forward. So yeah, pretty excited for the Ethereum ecosystem working together to sort of increase everyone's efficiency and specialization that way.
Fantastic. Great. So increasing speed, increasing efficiency, that's the name of the game here. And obviously allowing people to like narrow down focus, and like you guys are very clearly on the execution side. John, any takes on the modular thesis?
Yeah. So I'm like a lot older than everybody. I'm very old. I obviously a lot of people know me from kind of the beginning of Ethereum and the beginning of Consensus. Nick was one of my colleagues at Consensus. He's a very, I think he was 19 or 20 when he joined Consensus, and his first project was actually building something called Boardroom. like a token treasury management system, even before tokens really existed. But I would just say it's kind of like at the beginning of Ethereum, we said world computer. Okay, that was our meme, and we talked about 1,024 shards and these like very ambitious endeavors to kind of scale the L1 itself. Obviously, as we kind of kept going, we realized that's very, very hard. Then we said 64 shards, and then later it was like, okay, maybe we'll have one shard. So I think a lot of it has been kind of like figuring out as you go. I'm not entirely sure that there's been like a big master plan. And then, along the way, fantastic teams, like Scroll, like Fuel, and others come along and they innovate. And then somehow this starts to look like a set of solutions that are kind of like starting to scale Ethereum. And that's super cool. But like there are other approaches too. So one of the things with Telos, it's kind of like this slightly different approach with the delegated proof of stake at the base layer, and then emulating the EVM within that base layer. So obviously there's some trade-offs, but in terms of performance, you do get like, I don't know, almost 16,000 transactions per second and so on. So I do think the approach that and the path that Ethereum has taken up to this point has been kind of like more along the lines of figure it out as you go. That's created some robust solutions, but like with anything, it's created trade-offs. And so where we're at right now is the trade-off for the user is you have to be quite well educated, and you have to be quite experienced because you have to be able to navigate different networks. You have to know what the different trade-offs are. My buddy Carl Forsch, also Consensus alumni, went on and built Optimism as an example. Um, Optimistic rollups. I like to call them hopeful rollups. Arbitrum has a different approach, and so on. And then you have to kind of like change networks. You have to figure out which wallet you're using and why, and how to sort of navigate all that. And suddenly, um, even though we have this like constellation of scaling solutions for the user, it's quite a bit that they have to kind of figure out. And that's where I think, if we're not going to be able to at the base layer scale Ethereum to massive transactions, and instead we're going to have the L2 approach, which I think is totally fine. This particular trade-off is the one that I think has to be addressed. I view it as kind of one of the more pertinent or urgent needs, particularly if we're talking about like regular user adoption.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I think that segues into the next sort of like the topic that I want to discuss. So obviously the modular thesis within the Ethereum ecosystem is to help scale Ethereum and become like this world computer, like the settlement layer for the world and things like that. And we are well and truly on that path. I think a lot of the infrastructure and tooling is in place to afford for that, which is why we're seeing basically this I wouldn't call it Cambrian explosion yet, but we're sort of on the path there to a whole bunch of L2s, whether sovereign or whether general purpose, that are cropping up. We are well and truly in like a multi-chain ecosystem endgame where it's not going to be like winner takes all for sure. But given this, I think like John just pointed out, we are going to end up with a whole bunch of different problems from the user perspective, and none more important than, I would say, liquidity fragmentation that a user would experience. And probably that goes hand in hand with like just the user experience fragmentation. Like, for example, Scroll is, of course, built in its own way, but it is nuanced and different from, say, an Arbitrum and an Optimism. And Fuel on its own is definitely a much different take on, it's like an L2, but not an EVM in the purest sense. And John, of course, with Telos is an alt L1 altogether. So we're seeing alt VMs pop up. We're seeing, app chains, people building on, say, Arbitrum Orbit or, Optimism Superchain, what have you, right? So this is only going to, like the immediate downstream effect, which you're already seeing, is clear, like John was talking about, I have to switch over from one chain to the other, and the question is why, and will we ever see this meme of mass adoption ever come to fruition, right? If you're going to continue in this vein. So given this, firstly, I think all of you will agree that this is probably the biggest issue that we kind of need to solve here. But if you could just highlight your take on this particular problem, and what, if any, are your just general thoughts on potential for solutions. We'll deep dive on that further along in this conversation. But let's say, Ishan, if you were to start with you, do you? It's probably a rhetorical question, but do you acknowledge this problem, and then as a consequence, like, is there any specific take you have on it, and what do you feel could be potential solutions?
You mean like just fragmentation across the board, right? Like with
Yeah, just
the model.
let's just bring it under the umbrella of user experience problems, and then we can
Yeah.
go into like liquidity fragmentation specifically later.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a broader problem, right? Like liquidity fragmentation is probably just a subset of all of that. And I would definitely agree with what John mentioned, right? I think it's like a very pertinent problem. And given the fact that we already have like 100, like L2 beat lists, almost 100 L2s, and like 2025 will again probably see like a Cambrian explosion of more L2s as things progress, right? And all of this is great for developers in the sense that they have a lot of choices to make, and then they have like they can optimize their choices based on like more options that they have, and they can make the right decision that way. Again, like incentives, grants, like they can sway decisions here and there, but for the most part I can probably see like this is being a net good for developers. However, net bad for developers here exactly also is the fact that it could lead to paradox of choice, right? Like there would be like multiple high throughput chains, there's going to be like multiple new L2s, all having their brand positioning or all having their selling propositions in different manners. So I could see even developers getting confused, like which ones to deploy on. And once I think that goes away, I feel like I don't think it's going to go away, but the fact is the developers will choose something, but the users don't have to. I think that's where we are coming to, right? Like the users essentially don't want to be in a situation where, like how John mentioned, right, with Ethereum in the past, like you just have to create new wallets, like spin up new wallets, get some tokens bridged in, or like you do some fiat on ramping in some way or the other. That's really not what the user would want. Essentially, even like looking back at how like Venmo works or even UPI in India, right? Like I, as an Indian user, can send my can spend use Google Pay and just like send those transactions or send some amount of money to anyone else who's using some other bank account, right? That is really the end goal of crypto right now. And with all these different chains, with all these different modular thesis components bringing together, I think the problem is only getting more aggravated, which again begs a few teams, or like it requires a lot of chain abstraction protocols to come and sort of solve the UX front. Now they can do it like multiple ways to do that at the application layer or directly at the protocol layer. Like there's a bunch of users to do that, but it's a big problem, correct? Even like if I'm trading like any meme coins on Base or even on Solana, like even just using all of those now it's easier, but I would say it could get a lot more easier, like going further down the line. Like I really love like what Coinbase is doing with the Socket team, like with the Magic Spend product, where I as a user can just trade between two meme coins or two tokens without even touching like a liquidity pool or without even touching Uniswap or any other DEX right off the bat, right? So things are being made, or like decisions are being made, and like progress is being made in the right direction, but we still have a few ways to go, especially as like alt VMs like Fuel and all the other alt VMs coming to the space. I think that opens up problems on a different level, where these becomes problem beyond just the EVM. Like how can we get the EVM world integrated with the alt VM world? And that problem is coming sooner than most expect. So I think it's a very big problem in terms of user experience. So yeah, that's essentially my validation on the idea there.
Cool, great. Thanks, Ishan. Raza, anything to add here?
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate. I think that I often joke that I wouldn't necessarily consider myself crypto native, like 4 years active, say 2 years before that, like dabbling around. I think that there's a couple of things. I would like to isolate like, okay, mass onboarding and bad user experience to like not the developers, but just users. And then you have, let's say broadly, two types of users. One that are in the space today, let's call them crypto native, and then onboarding users like someone like my wife, who's lately been looking at crypto, and she's like, I'm re-experiencing her onboarding and all the pains that come with it. And so there's a general problem still when we look at onboarding in crypto. Even though on-ramp and off-ramp is way better, wallets are way better, that is still a painful experience. And so I think that whether we have a billion L2s, alt L1s, that doesn't really matter. I think the onboarding experience across the board is still pretty bad. And so solving that will basically open the gateway for users. But then still you need a reason to be on chain. And so I think that mass adoption has already occurred. If you look at Tron, UZT has proven that there is mass adoption. And so there's a reason for people to go through those pains because they experience economic freedom and access to financial services they didn't have access to before. And so they're willing to go through a more painful experience to get access to these services. And so I think that I think that a super app or a good value proposition will change the onboarding, and then people are willing to have a more painful onboarding experience. Now, if you look inside, let's say crypto native user experience and the fragmentation issue, again, maybe a hot take. You come into a store, you want to pay for water. You pull out your Visa card. They say, "I'm sorry, we don't accept Visa. We accept Mastercard." What do? You pull out your Mastercard. And so I think that, even though it's painful for a lot of folks in the space that want to, let's say, trade tokens, or tokens that are on specific chains, whether that's meme or other types of assets, I would argue that most crypto native people consider it a pain or a barrier, but they'll bridge it in and out. They'll move their funds around. Can that be more seamless? Sure, but it comes at trade-offs. Whether you look at like interop bridges or intents, and I think that connecting, let's say, the world inside of crypto better comes with dev experience issues. So what stack, what standard do you pick? I talk to a lot of retail apps. They really struggle with this account abstraction, to throw another buzzword in it. But I think that's improving, but it brings its own set of problems when you're talking about unification and for crypto people to, let's say, seamlessly transition into the ecosystem that are within the ecosystems. But I think that and we're making progress there. But with every progress, sometimes it feels 3 steps ahead, 2 steps back. But I am definitely, like, as a tech maxi, super excited for what everyone's building. Obviously, I'm aligned with the vision of a monolithical setup where I believe, a hyper optimized and secure chain is the way to go. But I'm super excited to see what modularism brings. But I think that we convolute the discussion sometimes a little bit, where if you look at mass adoption, that's an entire different set of problems. And even those problems, again, to close my argument, is that if you look at Tron, people are willing to go through horrible user experience just to get access to what crypto promises, which is a permissionless infrastructure to interact and gain value, economic value.
Thanks so much, Raza. I mean, firstly, thanks for taking the other side of the argument. I just thought it would be 3-0 straight wins, easy going, but no, thanks for doing that. I do have a follow-up question for you, though, is that given the fact that users are willing to make that extra step for the benefit of either being able to speculate to the extent or even in the types of assets that wouldn't normally be available to someone else in certain geographies and things like that, is basically allowing people to go through this whole process. The question I just wanted to quickly ask you is, if those impediments were removed, what does the world look like then? Even for the crypto natives, is it going to be the same business as usual? Is it going to change? Will people be able to spend more? Because I'm drawn to this analogy of basically how people were spending on the internet prior to something like Stripe. And Stripe basically enabled, I would say, the fact that I can sit here and buy something of a Chinese vendor, and I don't have to worry about being able to change what my card is, Visa, Master, doesn't matter. I'm paying in, say, Indian rupees. The guy is getting it payout in Chinese yuan. It doesn't matter. So that obviously prompted, I think, much larger spending, and it was like definitely like this moment within like the history of the internet where things started to change a lot. People started to spend much more money online and things like that because it got easy. So yeah, from that perspective and with that analogy, what how would you kind of say that world would look like?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I'll give you an example of my father. You mentioned you mentioned credit cards. So there was a time where even when the rails was available, people would not enter the credit card on the internet because they didn't trust it. And
Yes.
now, you don't think twice about it. I think that the question is, what is the problem? So lowering the barrier to entry definitely makes it easier for people who want to come in, but it doesn't solve the issue of why does someone want to like come in, right? So I definitely think it will make it easier. I think with over a course of time, with Bitcoin hitting 100K, and then with Ethereum like pumping and all these other ecosystems, we gain a lot of attention to the general audience. People want to come in, and so when these people want to come in to interact with the DeFi ecosystem, for instance, it will definitely make it easier, and a lot more people will come in or stick around or won't get scared. It doesn't necessarily solve for the fact that, okay, if I want 1 million people on my chain tomorrow, what makes them come on chain? That's a different and a different problem.
Understood. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, John, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean, I remember. So it's like, you know, I first, I first, I, my first Bitcoin was in 2013, and it took me a while to figure out like what to do. There wasn't a plethora of resources like all the YouTube videos like we have today. So it was a little bit janky, and I agree with Raz's take. I mean, I was willing to endure the pain because I was like very fascinated and highly motivated by Bitcoin. That being a user who doesn't know anything, even though there's tremendous resources available, it's like just overwhelming because back then all you had to do was figure out how to get Bitcoin and like how to get a Bitcoin wallet and seed phrase and so on. Um, Now with like all these other additional requirements, in fact, the onboarding and the mass adoption is happening through centralized exchanges. And so one of the things that even though, for example, on the Ethereum side or Solana or whatever, there is growth, um, I would say being dwarfed by the growth that exchanges are seeing. And today there's far more exchanges than ever before, and the scope and scale and size of those exchanges is in grow. And so, the reason for that is because you log in and you have your like unified one single place where you can kind of more easily manage all these different tokens and so on. Um, and so, I think that's like, and there's even fragmentation happening in the exchange ecosystem because they're fighting market shares changing, different growth vectors, and so on. Um, so I, like at the end of the day, and I have like spent quite a bit of time because most of my like daily activities are spent with people who are like deep in the space and experts. So I have tried to like mindfully kind of go out and whether it's family members or friends of friends or whatever, and just see what that experience is like for them. And it is overwhelming and it is very confusing. So eventually they just go to Coinbase, right? Or Binance or Bybit or whatever. Probably in most cases Coinbase. And so, um, if we're focused on on-chain activity and trying to grow that kind of a user base, it's like strictly mandatory that we get to the point where I have one interface. Um, it's easy to click some buttons, and I don't have to necessarily worry about like where things are going. Um, it could be that underneath the hood, the application I'm using or the tool that I'm using or whatever is being serviced and settled by Scroll or Fuel or whatever. And there could be different reasons for that. Best execution, like, I don't know, maybe better security or whatever. Um, a whole host of reasons why the underlying may be facilitating what I'm trying to do at the consumer level. But I think it does really need to be, you sort of like have this one super easy interface You get to where you're going very quickly, and then the stuff that's happening underneath, and whether it is Stripe or some of these other consumer apps, nonetheless, like there's this like highly complicated and robust, API and all sorts of other infrastructure layers that are facilitating such that the user has this like very simple one-click solution. And I think that's like I probably sound like a broken record, but I think it's like super critical to get to that point before there's real mass adoption in terms of on-chain, because otherwise, uh, frankly, in my opinion, we're like doing the centralized exchanges a huge favor by basically pushing customers in their direction, because that's where it's easy to do this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think those are extremely important points. And just picking off from what you just said there, John, there is, at least in like, I think this is a fairly popular opinion on CT right now that's been floating around, where we even here while we are talking, we talk about users using chains and how that paradigm needs to like drastically shift away, where users are chain agnostic and are instead just using apps. And that is sort of like a paradigm that people understand, users understand, and honestly, the more useful parts are in actually using applications themselves, and we need to kind of even lose it in our language when we talk about how users are interacting with applications and not really chains. So this whole notion of chain agnosticism comes, I believe, with a lot of like downstream effects. Do you think this whole idea holds water, and it's something that we should, as an industry, move towards? Raza, do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I think that like John's back, but John basically narrowed down on specifically the onboarding experience, and I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I've watched my wife trying to like get her hands more dirty with like crypto stuff, and then he's spot on. She very much like wants to default to a centralized exchange because there are two main reasons. One, the user experience, which most centralized exchanges are not also like super great, but it's still better than what they're used to. So that interface is very, very important. But the second thing as well, I think, is that when I explain to new users like how to manage your keys, or like when it comes to like the security risks that come with on chain, most people are just like not willing to take that on, and so that's definitely something where I would say is like that's narrowing it down on the onboarding experience, and that's narrowing it down. Let's say making sure that people are willing to go through the door. I think it's something that is quite ironic how we've been saying that. I mean, I've been hearing that since 2021, and I'm pretty sure John is young in spirit, but he's been here around a lot longer. I think Ishan as well. We've been hearing and saying that. I wouldn't say it's quite solved yet.
Yeah, so we keep talking about like onboarding to crypto. I know Raza, you mentioned it a couple of times, but what is onboarding to crypto? In the sense, I think if I look back, I think the way you're also talking about it is about user getting a wallet, getting hold of a bunch of assets. But I think nowadays you can't speak of onboarding to crypto in the absence of like when you don't contextualize it in terms of like an app. Like if you're talking about a new user coming to crypto, they're probably coming to crypto to use one particular app, whether it's pump.fun or whether it's the Radium exchange on Solana, or whether it is some I don't know some social app on that's getting built on Base or whatever. It could be anything, right? And this is what you guys are also sort of like working towards is developers come leverage your platform for specific gains and build certain types of applications. So I think when a user is going to get new user gets onboarded, they are going to do it in the context of the app. And then I just wanted to kind of double click on that aspect where it really is no longer about the chain that the user is on, but it's just what the app that they want to use and what is their experience when they come to actually use this app. Because if you think about things how they were a few years ago, like I remember mirror.xyz being this publishing platform which is censorship resistant, and a lot of writers within the space wanted to kind of get onto it, But the only way to use mirror.xyz was to connect your wallet. And most people obviously don't know what a wallet is. So now it's in the context of that app. That app is great. People are convinced that the stuff that I'm writing should not be censored, and hence I want to write on this platform. But yeah, I can't do it without having a wallet first, right? So this, I think, needs to get solved in the context of apps, and there are ways to be able to kind of do this, and then further downstream, once a user has been onboarded, firstly onto that app, and then indirectly onto crypto, then we kind of can hope for them to start doing other things which are speculative or non-speculative in nature, which may or may not involve painful methods for themselves. But yeah, Ishan, I just wanted to kind of also get your take on this, if you had a
Yeah,
specific, yeah.
for sure. I think for me personally, like when we say onboarding onto crypto, for me, what that essentially means is complete self custody, complete freedom and ownership of your assets, right? Now, essentially, like Raza said, like John said, like a lot of people are using centralized exchanges to sort of trade assets, or not even custody assets, right? They're just trading assets, but they don't have complete autonomy over those assets, right? They don't have the complete agency over those assets. So I wouldn't say those people are onboarded onto crypto. Now, when we say onboard onto crypto, again, self custody. But now, when you have those assets, whether these are tokens or whether these are ordinals or NFTs or just about anything on chain, right? And when you have complete ownership, now how can you deploy that on chain somewhere else without having to backtrack and go into centralized systems again? I think that is what essentially means onboarding onto crypto, and how you can stay on chain and deploy your completely self custody assets completely on chain. I think that is where, let's say, something like you mentioned, right, Mayur, like around uh, complete usage of an app. Like that is where like decentralized apps come into the picture, right? That's where I, as a user who's self-custodying assets, can deploy those assets somewhere else to do whatever else I want. Whether I want to, let's say, sell my wine, which has an NFT tokenized to it, or whether I want to supply USDC and borrow and like all these DeFi things, right? That is exactly where like self custody and chain abstraction makes sense for me in terms of user experience. Again, if we are looking at user onboarding via Coinbase or via Binance, that's great. Honestly, like more power to them. They are helping educate more people about what tokens are, essentially, even like top of the funnel education. But that wouldn't be like onboarding people onto crypto. That's just like onboarding people on how to speculate on assets. And that I wouldn't say that is like onboarding onto crypto in the truest sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I
John or
mean,
Raza, anything?
yeah. I would say so. I've been using. I'm not afraid to admit it. I definitely trade shitcoins on Solana, and it's a lot of fun. And I've been using a bunch of different things, including recently Griffane, which is that AI agent. It's kind of going absolutely crazy right now. From that, send funds there. Okay. If I use, I don't know, Backpack Wallet, let's say, and then I can delegate to the agent, and then I can talk to the agent, and it has these different modules like you can snipe on pump.fun, or you can do more things kind of each day. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, from a user experience, I think where it's going to get to, if we're talking about kind of regular people who don't really know much, is, first of all, I think for the vast majority of people, they're quite happy to trade off. And by the way, I agree with the last take, which is that like crypto to me should be just like, to me in the purest form, is self-sovereign custody over your assets, over your identity, and so on. But clearly, there's a willingness in the market to like make these trade-offs for convenience and for user experience. So I think something like what Griffin or others, I haven't used virtuals too much. Fund it with a wallet, and then you are then able to delegate, and then you're able to just kind of like talk to the AI and have it do stuff. And the extent to which it gets smarter and more capable over time makes it easier. But still, you have that kind of same problem where, how does the AI then, like, I don't know, you got to send tokens from a bunch of different networks, etc. So, I would say that somewhere along these lines is where there's going to be like a really happy medium, or a equilibrium point. The extent to which, like, an abstraction wallet solution can snap into an AI agent, and the user can send and delegate funds to that AI agent from their wallet without having to click too many buttons. And so you just kind of like click one button on your wallet, it goes to your AI agent, and then you just type in some words, and then like everything you want done starts getting done. Like that's what I think kind of the final form or like the next form of all of this looks like. That's one point. And then it just like not let's say not referring to the kind of people who don't know much about crypto who are new to it, but more mediocre, medium or kind of like more even more advanced users. Like as a more advanced user, I'm doing all kinds of DeFi all the time, and it's just like a huge pain. Honestly, dude, there's so many times where I have to do some type of maintenance on a wallet or something, consolidate something, and even if I have like a position on Morpho or Aave that's like a bad position, but it's just like I gotta dig up this wallet, I gotta move these funds, I gotta do all this stuff just to, migrate away from V3, V2 to V3, etc. And then I don't end up doing it, and it ends up costing me money. Um, so even for like kind of more advanced users, the extent to which I can just like click, save having to click a lot of buttons. It's kind of like if you look at DeFi Saver, I mean, that's like their core value proposition is like you click less buttons. I mean, you pay less gas too, but um, I think even for that subset of users, there's like a tremendous, you talk about capital efficiency. I know you mean it in the context of like, kind of like allocating funds and making sure that money is used efficiently, but also in terms of like people who are just like can't be bothered or put off maintaining those positions because to click a bunch of buttons and do a bunch of things, maybe that's a different kind of capital efficiency, but there's a huge opportunity time, right? And you don't want to have to spend all your time kind of figuring it out. I've got money here on this wallet, on this network, on this, that, I have to move it here and so on. But yeah, I think especially on the normie side, if you can figure out how to like snap into and integrate with all the different AI agents, so I just kind of talk to it and give it some simple instructions. That delegation model right now, at least for Griffin, as a kind of early example, is just wild. Like it's such a great user experience, if I'm being honest about it.
Yeah. No, that makes a world of sense. And in fact, now that you mentioned it, I don't even know what chain this is on. I'm presuming it's Solana, right?
Solana, yeah.
Same thing happens even now with like I think Pump.Fun. I have a bunch of friends who go gaga over Pump.Fun, and they have no like they don't talk about the fact that it's on Solana. That they just talk about the app that is there, right? And I think this will happen even more and more as we go, where people will hear about a very interesting like speculative opportunity, and that is the best way. Even like how Raza was talking about is like because there is that opportunity, people will try and do the painful stuff. But I think there is almost like this fiduciary responsibility on people like us who've been in the space to kind of ensure that it is not going to be painful. And I think we just stand to gain as a result of that happening. Like people are going to understand that there is this one asset and it's going to really do well. Someone is going to drop them this alpha, and then they ask where can they go and do this, and then they're told to go to Pump.Fun or use this AI agent and things like that. And now they go there and realize that they don't necessarily have the funds to be able to kind of ape into this meme coin, so to say, right? And then that should just not be a problem in my estimation. And the way like there's us and there's obviously other people who are looking to kind of solve this in different ways. And but the basic idea is the notion that an app is on a particular chain and you need a certain asset to be able to kind of spend to be able to acquire another asset, let's say, for example, or just I don't know, take a DeFi position. But more importantly, also as an extension, like to be able to spend, you need gas, for example, to be able to spend. You might even have the tokens, but you may not have the gas. That should just not happen. Like tomorrow, if there's an app that really takes off on Scroll, I shouldn't have to scramble all my funds from like Arbitrum, Optimism, and other places into Scroll, go use the canonical bridge and bridge assets over, just to be able to try out an app. Whether I don't even know if I like it. Right? So this I think is the main impediment that we ought to remove. And I think personally, I feel like we go a very long way if we kind of made users' lives, bring them to a place where no user wants to bridge but needs to bridge, and then if you remove that impediment, I think we will go a very long way. But I would love for Raza to provide his take here on just this particular aspect, that once we've onboarded a user, this notion of them being able to like freely spend funds wherever they want to be able to, without having to scramble, like the situation which John just described.
Yeah, I mean, like, I might have been playing devil's advocate, but obviously, like, a better user experience for people in crypto, is important too. And I think that the whole idea behind scaling Ethereum is that assuming that the cost can go down radically, what that means is that it provides opportunity on the application layer. So what that does is, again, assuming that the dev experience is good, security, you can, that's good, and you can basically create that extremely simple user interface John was talking about and Ishan mentioned too, is that if you could then have the economically it makes sense too, financially, so much so that me as an app, I would say, pay me $2 a month and then don't, or $2 a year, and don't worry about, gas. It's kind of like a subscription model. If you look at Amazon Prime, it's very normal, right? I mean, people pay like $3 and then get like overnight shipping and, yada, 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 all these benefits. As an application, you talk to retail and to consumers. And so, but in order to allow for that, I mean, as an application, when you're on Scroll, for instance, or Fuel, or even on Telos, the requirement is that they basically look at their cost of operation. And so if that makes sense on all these layers, dev experience, security, and then the cost efficiency, what that will enable for, let's say, you as a user, is to come in and one click, sign up, having a user interface that you're familiar with, but you're not really bothered by signing transactions or paying gas fees. And now, by having scaling solutions that, you basically enable that. Blockchains are very interesting because by virtue of our operating models, we're incentivized to like the decisions that we make on an infrastructure level directly impact consumers, i.e. native account abstraction, right? Directly impacts the application and the consumer, or having a certain gas level fee, the fees on that directly hit. So the operating model almost like B2B2C. But yeah, I mean, I can't deny that I see scaling as an enabler for this, but we definitely need it. A simple user interface, no gas fees paid, click, and enjoy the benefits.
How far out do you think we are from that sort of like an interface?
I'm optimistic and pessimistic at the same time, I guess. I think that when it comes to like abstraction layers, or like talking about abstraction, I think there's a lot of novel ideas. I'm a tech maxi. I love all these new standards and different people going about different ways, but I also think it hinders when it comes to dev experience and battle tested solutions. So in that regard, I think that sometimes it feels like we're very far away. Spaghetti code is real in Web3, and I talk like, without naming names, but I think the bigger brands, when I talk to them, they're like, oh, when it comes to account abstraction, new standards, and so many different solutions. Like, what do you trust? Where do you go for? And then also, I think that on cost efficiency, we're not quite there yet, but in the Ethereum ecosystem, but I would say we're making great progress.
Got it. I really think we should do a demo with you of what we built. I don't think you had the chance. I think the others in your team have. But maybe I'll try and find some time with you after this call to try and figure this out. Yeah, so we're almost at the end. So I just wanted to kind of get from each and every one of you, like just a general take on, we're not talking about 2-3 years down the line, definitely not years, but 6 months down the line. How hopeful are you of like all of this just working out for for users, for consumers, and what does that future sort of look like 6, maybe 9 months down the line? Because I truly believe we are at the cusp of something like magnificent in terms of like making this 10x user experience jump. It's what we've been working towards. I know a lot of good teams have been working towards it. So we have like scalability is all like more or less solved for. Block space is abundant and fairly cheap. I think that's solved for. I think if we solve for the user experience, which I think us and a bunch of different teams are very close to doing, I think we get to a place where we can really start aiming as an industry towards more and more adoption in general, grow the pie, everyone wins. But instead of talking about what that looks like years and years away, maybe Ishan, 6, 9 months from now, what are you hoping
Wait, sorry.
the space looks?
You mind if I go? You mind if I go first? Just
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
John.
have hard stops in 2 minutes. Let me
Yes.
show you guys 1 second here. Let me figure out. Here's the Bitcoin Abu Dhabi crazy event. Eric Trump just got off stage. Everyone's going crazy. But I would say just real quick, there's like, I don't know, 50, 100,000 new tokens a day. You use the sniping bots on pump. It's just like constant. It never stops. So the number of tokens, if we're having this conversation next year, it's going to be like tens of billions. Okay. We're going to get to trillions of tokens pretty soon. So I guess my only kind of final thought is like this has to be solved. This definitely has to be solved. There's going to be hundreds of more. I forget which one of the two gents at the beginning of the call said there's going to be many more. Where it's L2s or whatever. There's just so much stuff coming down the pipeline that what the consumer is going to be facing going forward is billions tokens, hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different networks, different solutions, etc. Like this is already kind of overwhelming. It's going to be completely overwhelming very, very soon. So, figuring this out is like, I would say mission critical. I think definitely the Ethereum Foundation or other foundations, but definitely the Ethereum Foundation should like really seriously try to grants and like support innovation in this space because it's going to be like totally overwhelming very soon, in my opinion. If that's just assuming like constant rate of growth, let alone like any significant rate of growth. So we got to figure this out very soon. That's pretty much my take.
All right, great. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks
Ishan,
guys.
more
Sorry, I got to
comments?
run. Thank you.
Yep,
Thanks,
thank
John.
you.
Yeah, I sort of agree with like John. Like things are only going to get more. I mean, it's getting accelerated anymore, right? Like we're in the middle of a bull market. Like 2025 is poised to be a great year, so things will only get more aggravated. Like we'll have many more L2s, many more tokens. That being said, right, I feel like some teams are really doing some good work, and we already have a basis for how things are operating. For example, with Socket and with Arcana, of course, like there are use cases where we don't know how they operate on scale, but they have foundations. Like people are using them, right? Like people who want to trade or speculate are using them. And at the end of the day, the only thing now that remains to be seen is like how that operates at scale, right? Even at Fuel, I mean, we have a UTXO based design. We have like native message passing that's going to be across all the Fuel VM chains. So we have a lot of these things built out at the protocol level itself. Now the only question is, of course, it's working. It's going to work. Some of this is like working really well. How it all works when the bull market really hits, on like when things scale up to a degree. I think that's really what is what I'm curious to see right now. But like I said, a lot of the foundations are already in place. A lot of PO proof of concepts are already in place. Like a lot of usage is already in place. It's just about scale now.
Got it. Great. Thanks. Raza, last word.
Yeah, not much to add. I think that, like I said, I'm a tech max here. I enjoy new solutions coming out there. But I definitely think that that there will be a challenge for protocols to adopt these, whether it's interop, whether it's on an application layer. But I'm hopeful. I think that slowly but surely we'll get there. I think everyone is growing their ecosystem, and the pie is growing bigger and bigger. And that just means that, there are inherent challenges, but I think it's in our culture and it's in our DNA to overcome these challenges. I think everyone has a very strong belief why we're here. At Scroll, we believe in the open economy, and like I think it was mentioned by Ishan and John as well. It's like accessing these financial rails, right? Getting access to all these financial benefits, that excites me a lot. I'm originally from Pakistan, 100 million people unbanked. It excites me beyond words to play a role there, where we would provide, let's say, these people with a debit card on chain that allows them to buy insurance. So I think strong belief across the board, and I'm very hopeful about the future.
Fantastic. I think that's a great note to end on. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here, taking the time to talk about all of these different things. Thanks so much, and hope we can do this again very soon, where we're hopefully talking about how we progressed even more so. But yeah, thank you so much. Please take care. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Take care.
Mayur. Thanks, Raza. Yeah.
Take care, guys.